Welcome to the Roots and Branches JJC Alumni Podcast. As the nation's first community college, JJC has been making history since 1901. With more than 70,000 alumni, we have an endless supply of stories to share. Listen in to find out how deep our alumni's JJC roots go and how far they've been able to branch out into our community and beyond. Welcome back, everybody. We're so excited to have you here for another episode of the JJC Alumni Podcast. Today, we have Dr. Brian Thompson with us, and he is the Director of Undergraduate Programs and a clinical professor in the Economics Department at DePaul University. He's also the founder of Black Essington Solutions, a business development and strategic advisory firm. Brian, I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Brian is actually no stranger to our Roots and Branches initiative, having been one of our very first video interviews that we did a while back before the podcast really even got going. And you said something in that interview, Brian, that has stuck with me since then. You were talking about what you say to students on their first day in one of your economics and business classes. And you said to them that at one point you failed the courses that you are now teaching. And you sort of use that as this great icebreaker. And I think it's perfect, especially for new students coming in who think they have to have all the answers right away and that they can't make any mistakes for fear of getting off track for their career. But your success is a testament to how you don't always know where life is going to lead you. And there's lots of surprises and changes. And I'm so excited to now have you on the podcast so we can dive a little deeper into all of that.
Absolutely. I mean, life's a journey. And I think that if you recognize that and you have the right support, you can go anywhere you want. However, one of the challenges is that if you don't know where you want to go, then it becomes problematic. And I think for me, as we'll talk about, my experience at JJC was very helpful in developing that kind of pathway for my journey to kind of help propel me in the right direction.
That's great. So, Brian, let's actually talk about your time at JJC and how you got here. I know you came from a family of alumni, and maybe that influenced some of your decision, but what led you to be a student here?
I think it did. Like you said, my family were all alumni of JJC, and ironically, my father was a basketball coach at JJC when I was younger, so I was very connected to JJC. I spent a lot of time at JJC. I just didn't know that I was going to be going there at the time, but you're right. It definitely was an early step for me in terms of trying to better understand who I was and where I was going, and I think that for me, the time that I spent there was very helpful in my development. And so I might be a little biased in the sense that I really believe in education. Both my parents are educators. And so for me, education has played an important role. But I think at the time when I was there, I wasn't very directed. Didn't know exactly where I wanted to go. And so the support network and the variety of classes and just the opportunity to kind of independently explore who I was trying to become was very helpful. And so I'm very thankful for the time that I had at JJC.
We actually just published our Spring 2026 Connections magazine, and we did a whole spread on our alumni over the decades to celebrate our 125th anniversary. And we asked those alums to kind of give us an idea of what the vibe was like at JJC during their time. So you were here in the 90s. What was the vibe like on campus in the 90s in JJC?
The 90s, the good old days. It was smaller. I come on the campus now and it is really something to speak of. There's a lot of buildings, a lot of students, there's just a lot going on. And so it's certainly smaller, but you definitely had that, again, communal feel where people were connected and people knew each other. And I think that probably still remains true today. But it was, I think the vibe was definitely, it's an opportunity to explore. It was different than high school. And when you go from high school to college, you have a lot more independence. And so part of the journey is navigating how do I manage that independence. And I think that, again, JJC was very instrumental in that process for me. And just, again, from selecting your classes to selecting majors, you have all these new opportunities and also responsibilities. And so then the question becomes, well, what do you do with that? And having good mentors and having good advisors is really useful in that way.
So what was the next step for you after your time here at JJC? I know you said that you weren't quite sure what you wanted to do, but what was the next step when you left here?
Sure. So going back to what you said earlier, what I tell students is that, I failed classes that I teach today. And part of that was just, again, not knowing why I was doing what I was doing. And so for me, fundamentally, that was a really important piece of understanding why I'm doing something. And even today, as an educator, I always tell students why we're doing something. And I think for me, that next step of going to university, I had a better understanding of the why and understanding why things are important. For example, one of the things I tell students is that your ability to communicate will strongly affect your income. And if you don't understand your own finances and understanding money and understanding math, those are all important things because no one's going to watch your money better than you. And so those are all things that I think I learned. I learned the why at JJC, which made it much easier for me to transition into university. And then from there, I became a finance major. And at some point, I was taking calculus 2, and I'm thinking to myself, like, that was quite a step up for me based on where I started. And so I think all that becomes not necessarily easy, but easier once you understand the why.
That's such great advice. And I don't want to jump ahead to all the great stuff that you did when you moved back into higher ed, because I first want to talk about how after you left college, you had this entrepreneurial spirit. You knew that teaching, that sort of act of educating, was something you want to do. And you sort of blended those two together by starting a business.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important to know where you're coming from. If you understand, like, like your parents and grandparents, like you can really tap into some things there. And so, like, for me, both my parents are educators. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. And so at the time, I didn't really realize that I had these skills and capabilities. But over time, the more education you get, the more you learn about yourself as well. I think that's part of the education process. And so I tapped into the fact that entrepreneurship runs in my family. And so I started a martial arts school with a couple partners from high school. And that was, again, a great entrepreneurial journey and opportunity to learn how business really works. I mean, I think one of the things that's challenging in education is that we try to talk about how things work, but it's in a book, or it's kind of like in a simulated environment. But when you go out to do things in the real world, you get immediate feedback. And so that is one of the benefits of, again, kind of that applied learning. And so we did that for over a decade, running a martial arts school, and expanded to a second location and hiring people and, like pricing things. They're just, you learn how to do everything. And so, like, for me, that was very fundamental, because taking that real world experience and bringing it back to the classroom is extremely beneficial for students.
That's great. And so that business, I mean, that was highly successful, but you still had that pull to want to teach in a different capacity. Like, you had this pull to get back to higher ed. How did that transition finally happen while you were running a successful business?
Absolutely. So I think for me, you never know when opportunities are going to show up. I always thought I would get into teaching in retirement. It's like you go, you do business, and then you retire, and then you teach. But I had an opportunity to teach as an adjunct at a community college. And so I took that opportunity, and I enjoyed it, and the students enjoyed what I was bringing to the classroom. And so that tended to kind of manifest into other opportunities, and ultimately led to me getting a doctorate. I'm a firm believer, I might be biased, but I'm a firm believer in the education process. And again, all these pieces along the way really, helped build who I am today.
So you accomplish this huge goal, getting your doctorate, and you start working for DePaul University. And I mean, just how much you've grown in your role there has been tremendous, Brian. I know even just in the couple of years since our first video together, I mean, in addition to still teaching a full course load at DePaul, you're also now the director of undergraduate programs. So what does that role look like?
Sure. So I really enjoy helping students become who they're going to be. And I think that, like, one of the things that happens as an advisor, and that's really what that role entails, is a lot of advising students. And so whether it's advising about careers and trying to think about where they want to go, I really try to get across how important it is to understand what you want. And I think that strategically, I teach a lot of classes in strategy. I think that's really important. And, everything that you do, if you understand what you want, then you can understand where you're going. And so I think that as individual students set a chart of where they want to go, as we as a department set a chart of where we want the department to go, it's all about really just having a vision of, like, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and then working backwards to kind of like fill in the blanks. And I think that, as you mentioned, going back to the, getting the doctorate, it's ironic. My wife and I, we actually did our doctorate programs together, which I highly recommend. It's good, good harmony for the household, if that's possible. But we did our doctorates together because it's a goal we set working out in the gym some years ago. We said, we have this 5-year plan. This is what we want to accomplish. And we did it. And so I think that I try to get that point across to students, is like how important it is to really have a vision of where you want to go. And again, things are going to change. The world's going to change around you, but just having an idea of what it is that you're trying to accomplish with your life, with your time, where you're going to go, like, all those things are important for really getting to where you're trying to go.
And it sounds like in your case, I didn't realize that you and your wife were working on that doctorate together, but that really does take some of the pressure off, right? When you can both like commiserate with each other when things are really hard and busy, but then also be understanding of the time that's involved in that level of education. And you guys are both probably working at the same time, but you being in that role then as somebody to help guide those students is so valuable, even beyond just the work that you're doing in the classroom, because like you said, the example of you and your wife doing that together, having a support system to accomplish your goals is so important. But then having really good advisors in college and having people who really, you have all this real world experience that you're bringing to the classroom, you're giving that to them in the room, and you're help advising them on their career and futures. I mean, you're just doing so much. You're such an asset to DePaul. So I hope you see that. And obviously other people see that in you too, because you were actually invited to give a TEDx talk, right? 2017?
Yeah, back in 2017, I had a great opportunity to do a TEDx event, and it's quite a production. You have an acting coach, you have a speaking writing coach, and they really help to structure things because it is a very formalized process. And it's interesting because, again, I speak professionally all the time, so you walk into these type of things like, oh, I've got it, and the reality of it is that, yes, you may have it, but there's a certain way that they want it, and so that is very important for their branding and what they do, and it was a great opportunity for me to learn from people that do things differently than I, and I think that a lot of the things I shared in that talk were just really about, as you mentioned, about being an asset. If we recognize that we are all assets and that we have unique resources and capabilities, and part of life's journey is recognizing what those unique resources and capabilities are so that we can use them and help them be useful to others. And when we think about that, and from a value perspective, I think that we can get so much more from what we're doing.
You actually mentioned to me that people still watch that TED Talk and they're still finding it online, and that you continually receive feedback about it. What is some of the feedback that you're getting from people who watch it?
Yeah, I mean, like some of the things that people, like it resonates. It resonates with having a low GPA, like the idea of having an ultra low GPA and then going on and doing something, great that is possible, and because other people have experienced the same thing. And education's tricky because, we try to create an educational environment that suits a group of people, say 30, 40 people in a room. But the reality is that education truly is individual. And so I try to understand where students are coming from so that I can, to the best of my ability, tailor their experience to their needs. And I think that individuals, as we all educate ourselves, it's our job to tailor the experience to our needs. And that means that we all play a unique role in what we do and what we're trying to get from something. And so if students walk into situations, basically, better understanding like what they can expect and how this can be useful, and somebody frames it in that way, then I think they will get more from their learning experience.
I certainly remember my transition into college and that pressure that I felt to like kind of have it figured out and do all the things. But it's a different perspective now being a parent of a high schooler who just graduated, class of 26, and now she's off to college here at JJC in the fall. And what you say about people needing to have at least a focus, an idea of sort of where they want to go is very, very crucial. But the pressures then, once that decision's made to like get it done in a certain timeline or to have everything all figured out at once, I think is just where so many students then like lose sight or get off track. And what I love about your story, even when you were on Roots and Branches the first time, is the way you talked about like each point has taught you something new, and all that has developed into all these amazing opportunities, and now you are helping guide students. So what are some future plans do you think you have in the education world? Do you want to do another talk? Are you trying to do more speaking opportunities? I know your schedule's pretty busy as it is, but just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I stay busy, and I like to stay busy because, again, I think that I have a lot of value to offer to the world. And I think that for me, thinking at a larger scale is important. One of the things that might be, I think, is different from when, you and I were in school is that we didn't have like the social pressures that students have today. We didn't know what we didn't know. So like that was kind of a benefit. Didn't realize it at the time, but it's actually kind of a benefit. Whereas now there's this infinite amount of information about all the different jobs that are available, and you can see that somebody's getting this internship and you're not getting an internship and how that makes you feel. And so I think those are all challenges. And so I think that the unique challenge for education and educators is how do you create a more tailored experience that meets the needs of students and empowers them to go out and tackle the world in a meaningful way. To me, it's not about more tests and more exams and things of that nature. It's about like the way you make people feel and the confidence that you give them. And so I think that is the role of a successful educator going forward, is creating successful outcomes for individuals.
I think that's such a great advice. I love that. So in addition to all the stuff that you're doing at DePaul, all the speaking opportunities you're doing with students, you have really reconnected with JJC quite a bit over the last couple of years, especially as it pertains to our Entrepreneurial and Business Center here at JJC. And that's been a newer department and area that we've been really trying to grow. We have wonderful people in that, and it's really been an awesome opportunity, not only for like all the small businesses in our community who are benefiting from that, but also all the alumni involvement that we get to have with people coming back and sharing their expertise and their insight. So how have you reconnected with EBC, and what are some of the things that you're doing with them?
Well, first, I think the EBC is amazing. It's not only amazing for what it does for the JJC community, but it's amazing in what it does for the community at large. And so I think that that's all wonderful things. And I also believe that the world will become more entrepreneurial going forward. And so I think they're right at the epicenter of future opportunities, because what they're offering is what's going to be needed as the world continues to essentially transition. But, what I've been doing over the last couple of years with the EBC is just offering programming, again, like kind of that applied learning. What I like to say in class is that, anything I say in class, you could probably find on YouTube somewhere, but it's the nuances, it's the applied, it's, kind of integrating the experience alongside the kind of the academic textbook type of thinking. And so really trying to, again, tailor and customize experiences to individuals. Everyone's individual business, they experience it through their lens. And so trying to tap into their lens and understanding it through the way that they see their day-to-day, that's what I try to bring to those environments. And so we're working on some additional programming going forward that hopefully will tap into the needs that individuals, businesses have kind of going forward.
What are some of those different courses that you've taught that other people can join into at the EBC?
Sure. My area of focus just in terms of teaching is strategy and decision-making kind of through the lens of economics. And so decision-making is essential for an entrepreneur. Like they're going to do this on a daily basis. And some of the type of classes that we're looking at is not only just making decisions, but, financial decisions. Like how do you make financial decisions and incorporate that alongside AI and thinking about like ways in which to enhance your decisions so you can look at the information that will help you essentially make better choices. There's a lot of data, that are disposable, but the reality is like, how do we tap into that using in a meaningful way?
So, Brian, I think I heard that you guys are working on a upcoming project with Rooted in Manuka. We did a really wonderful Roots and Branches feature on them. They were featured in our Connectors magazine because they are a business that has an entire back kitchen staff that's all JJC alumni. One of their owners is a JJC alum. They bring our musicians to play. They are literally rooted in our community and JJC. And so we've loved working with them. So I'd like to know what this upcoming project is.
I didn't know that the back kitchen staff is all at JJC. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Rooted is a very unique company, or a unique restaurant, in that the drinks and the food that they offer, it's things you would expect in downtown Chicago, right in Manuka. So I think that it's, they've done a really amazing job of crafting a brand and an offering that, again, is like on par with things that you would expect in downtown Chicago. But you're right, like we are working on a project. One of the things I like to do is I like to try to, again, bring the classroom to the real world and the real world to the classroom. And so we're working on a project with some graduate students to essentially, kind of work with Rooted to look for new value opportunities and see might there be an opportunity. And one thing about value I think is really important to keep in mind is that, you and I, we don't pay for stuff, we pay for value. Like what is valuable to us? And so when you think about value is really willingness to pay minus costs. And so understanding what consumers are willing to pay for and understanding the costs associated with obtaining whatever product or service that they're engaging in. So looking across their business and looking at how the students can strategize and use their knowledge, use AI in terms of data to really, kind of, again, look for value opportunities that are beyond maybe what the company is currently looking at. I think the framing is what really matters in a lot of these types of situations. If you're an individual business owner, you're in it every day, you're working with customers, you see things in a very specific, certain way. But sometimes having an outside party who has never seen any of these things, that doesn't think about, anything that the way you think about it, comes in and they come up with an idea. It's like, wow, I wish we would have thought of that. And so I think that is kind of the opportunity here, is like, getting students involved and bringing in some tools and some capabilities that are not necessarily better than, but just different than what the owners are currently doing. And we'll see where it goes. I'd love to see if there's some new product offerings, some new service offerings, maybe some new markets. We'll see, how it goes. I think it's really an opportunity for the students as well as for Rooted.
I feel like that illustrates the beauty of what the EBC is doing in terms of giving this free, if you will, service to this business in our community, while it's also giving these graduate students and those of you working with it an opportunity to use that to learn and try something new, and the way that that all works together to benefit everyone. And Rooted is special, I think, too, because, their connection to JJC has been so strong. But as a small business, I mean, you're always looking for help. You're always looking for insight. And the fact that they can keep coming back to EBC for different ways to enhance what they're doing and try, it's a great success story. And I love that that partnership is still going to continue.
I think you're highlighting the opportunity in education in general. Obviously the EBC is connected to JJC. And so you think about like what education is and what it should be in the future. And that is a platform that brings value and creates value on both sides for all parties involved. And so if you think about it from that perspective and you develop programs and offerings and services around that, again, I think education can look very different going forward in terms of like the business model and what people need as those preferences change. And obviously there's competitive markets and things of that nature, but the reality is that at the end of the day, people fundamentally want to improve their lives. That's why they engage with any type of educational opportunities. They want their lives to be better at the end of that opportunity. And so if that's the case, if you can create that value, then I think sky's the limit.
So well said. See, this is why they're hiring you for TED Talks, Brian. This is why. You're such a good speaker. Okay, so, I never want to end any of these podcasts without the opportunity for you to share more of your wisdom, especially for students who are coming up. And I think this can really be not only just for future wolves, like my daughter and everybody that are coming into college, but really just, I guess, advice in general to students who are still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, you're right. If you go back to what I was saying earlier about kind of like the resources and capabilities, like what makes you unique? And I almost kind of like to think about myself as like my own personal economy, right? So like if I think about like there's this world that we have there's jobs and there's stock markets and there's the economy, there's all these things that are going on around us, but like you are a unique person that are kind of like working through all that. And so then the question becomes is what is unique about you? Like businesses that are differentiated tend to be more successful. And so it should really be no different with us as individuals, right? If we are uniquely different, there's one Taylor Swift, right? And so I can sing a song and Taylor Swift can sing a song, but you're probably a lot more willing to pay Taylor Swift to sing a song than me. And so it's all about that uniqueness and tapping into like what you have to offer. And then also too, recognizing what opportunities are your opportunities. And I think that life can be very challenging if you are chasing opportunities that are not yours. And so for me, at 49 years old, I know I don't look it, but at 49 years old, if I were to say, you know what, I want to be a professional basketball player, that's my goal in life, it's not going to happen, right? Like, because there's too many things that are stacked up against me. And so I could keep applying all my time and effort towards that goal, and it would be very troubling, to see it not come to fruition. And so part of what life's journey should be is identifying, not only what are your unique resources and capabilities, but what are the market opportunities that are best suited for you and tapping into that, because things will move much more quickly if you do that, as opposed to kind of, again, chasing the wrong opportunities. And I think fundamentally that starts with just understanding who you are and what you want. And that's why like reading, being around smart people, having good mentors, watching your podcast, these are all things that people should do to really, find out more who they are so they can apply themselves to the right opportunities.
Very well said, Brian. That's great advice. I knew you would give that. So I am going to link to your TED Talk in the show notes, but I also want to give you an opportunity because we really didn't talk about the services that you provide at Black Essington Solutions. And I think that after people hear you speak, that the kind of services that you can provide might be helpful. Do you want to share just a touch about what you do in your business that's outside of education?
Sure. A lot of it's corporate education. So I do a lot of training. I speak at conferences, I speak at events, doing corporate retreats, things of that nature. So I'm really focused on kind of like taking a lot of what I do in the classroom and then making it a little bit more applied to different scenarios, working with different corporations, government agencies, municipalities. Those are all kind of areas that have been my purview in the past. I'm working on a book, kind of a strategy guidebook coming up, as well as some online learning as well. And so really kind of focus on just, taking what I've done in the past and just kind of doing it at a larger scale. I think that there's a lot going on in the world that creates an opportunity, again, for not only just my business, but all businesses to kind of grow. And so that's really what I'm looking to do, is to take what I've done and put it on a larger stage.
So does that mean I'll get a signed copy of that book?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, again, we will link to all of these great resources, including our Entrepreneurial and Business Center. And we just want to make sure that we have all those resources. If you've listened to the podcast today and want to bring Brian on board, because you can tell that he's an amazing speaker. So thank you so much, Brian, for being here today and sharing your wisdom and insight.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
To all of our listeners, we hope you'll join us on the next episode. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Roots and Branches JJC Alumni Podcast. For more episodes, information, foundation events, and ways to give or get involved, visit jjc.edu/alumni.